Hello, everyone, and welcome to Answer the Call. Today's episode I'm really excited for. It's the discussion about the state of PvP in Star Citizen with Whitesnake and Vergil. So these are two people that I respect their opinions on this subject very much. And if we were ever going to have a discussion about this, I couldn't hold the conversation myself. I don't PvP very much, but I do know the importance of it and why it needs to be good in Star Citizen. I think if you don't have villains, it's not good for an MMO. I think if you don't have a good PvP base, there's not a lot to work towards for Star Citizen or just any MMOs in general. I think that's always been something that is really important. That stuff like that is always really good, right? So like casual players end up seeing PvP, want to take part because it looks really cool, it's really fun, that kind of thing, right? So that's what I see the importance of PvP in. So I guess that's probably what we'll start out with these guys is why they feel it's important, and then we'll go in and discuss the state of it. So without further ado, we don't really need to have the normal big long intro that I usually start with. Let's just jump in and start talking to these guys. Whitesnake, Vergil, welcome. Thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so we'll start out with Whitesnake. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And yeah, just go. We'll start with that. We'll go with that with you two guys first.
All right. I am Whitesnake. I am the tactics officer in Legacy Fleet, a medium-sized mercenary org. We're pretty standard when it comes to that. I know there's a lot of PMCs out there. Probably the thing that's different about us is that we do the Legacy Instructional Series,
yes,
which is a series of YouTube channels to help people learn how to... it's mostly focused on flying and combat and PvP, but every once in a while we do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And yeah. And we're also really big into testing and trying to improve the game and generally be a good force in the community when it comes to that. And that's pretty much it.
Nice. And Vergil, same goes for you. So who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And yeah, why would you be relevant to this conversation, basically?
Yeah, so I'm Vergil. Obviously, some of you know me already. I guess I'm a managing director of an organization called Shadow Moses and Moses Studies, which are is probably the premier PvP organization in the player universe right now. I guess we kind of see ourselves as the villains, and to a lot of the wider community, they see us as griefers, but which I'm sure we'll get to discussing here. But yeah, just part of someone who comes from a PvP background from all different kinds of games, and really interested in the whole space MMO, and that's me.
All right. Real quick, because this is probably going to come up a couple times, is Raid Shadow Legends did decide to sponsor today's stream. So now, obviously, they didn't sponsor today's YouTube video or anything like that, but this will end up on YouTube at some point. So if you guys hear some sounds, that's why there's a little sponsored stream going on right now. All right, so now let's start out with why is PvP important in Star Citizen? And Vergil, we'll go to you first, and Whitesnake, just feel free to jump in whenever you feel appropriate.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of, if I was to, I would describe it as kind of the spine of Star Citizen and the MMO in general, mostly because it touches so many systems like salvaging, it touches trading, it touches piracy, combat, dogfighting, which is basically all the pillars that is made up of this game. And it is probably why it's so important. I don't think that it should be mandatory for all these players when it comes to this MMO, but
of course,
that's what come from, is the fact that it's touching almost every system, to which not many others do. So
yeah, go ahead, Whitesnake. What do you think?
I think it adds to immersion because I sort of see space and going out into space is this really risky thing, like in my mind. So by having PvP in there, you add an element of unpredictability
Yes.
to what every game, no matter what you do, if you script AI, it's always going to be somewhat predictable. You're going to know if you're going to go here, you're going to see these AI, you have this chance to see these guys interdict your cargo or whatever, and you're going to be able to find ways around it and to be able to predict it.
Yeah, they're always going to act pretty similarly, right? When you experience them, there's not too many different dynamics that come with that.
Yeah, so it just injects unpredictability to space. It injects risk, which I think is key to getting the full immersive experience. And honestly, in games without some element of PvP, I just don't find myself liking it personally as much.
Same, and I don't think that goes for everybody, but even for the person who likes to just, I don't know, run cargo sort of peacefully by themselves, I feel like even those players, if they don't feel some sort of a risk that they might lose their cargo or somebody might find me, I feel like that always needs to be, that if that's not there, then they will eventually get bored of the game and eventually stop playing. And I think, like Vergil said, it's the backbone, and like Whitesnake said, for immersion, I think it's just for the general length and life of Star Citizen, is if you're not giving it a good... If you don't have something like that, you're not going to enjoy the game for a long period of time, because there's never going to be the risk. There's only going to be the reward. And then it's just going to eventually get really kind of boring, is how I look at it. But yeah, let's move on to probably the most important subject. What is the state of PvP in Star Citizen today? So let's start with Whitesnake on that one. We'll just kind of go back and forth.
Well, I'm just going to kind of put the issues with the accounts and persistence and all that aside, because of that, a lot of my guys and gals, they can't really play at all, and that's not specific to PvP. But aside from that, I would say 3.9 probably improved things quite a bit for most people. I know some disagree, and that's cool. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done still. Do you want me to go into details?
Yeah, absolutely. Go into some specifics.
This will probably come up, but I actually agree. I don't mean to say it like that, but I agree with a lot of Vergil's posts that he made on Spectrum.
Yeah.
Some things I sort of disagree with, but I think that the prisons did add overall. A lot of people were worried that they wouldn't, but me personally, I'm seeing more criminals, which nobody really expected. I'm seeing more PvP happening, and just like I was saying with that risk thing, there's, for basically part of the community right now, there is risk to dying, because you'll, depending on the circumstance, you'll go to jail.
Yeah.
What I think would help a lot is if there were more risk for everybody. So if you're a good guy or whatever, you don't have crime stat. It isn't just you're expediting a claim and that's the only thing that happens that's bad to you. Or if you're a cargo guy, of course you lose your cargo, so that's a lot of risk for them. But just a normal person, if I can basically be as reckless as I want. I don't have that fear that I was talking about, in other games where I'm like worried about getting killed, because I know I can just respawn whenever I want.
Yeah, and Vergil, you can jump in now. What do you think is... What is the current state, and what are just some general things that are good and maybe not so good about it?
Yeah, I'd say if we're building a house where we'd be barely past the foundations. And I think the most disappointing part, which most of the community is kind of upset with, is the fact that we were further along back in the day. Now, I mean, if you've watched any media or me talk on any streams or anything, you'll almost constantly hear myself and Snake Eater referring back to 3.4, because in 3.4, a lot of the mechanics that PvP leaned on were fleshed out. Mind you, missiles weren't working, but EMP was in the game. It was balanced. There was laser cannons, and cannons of any sort were obviously the meta and a problem, and could have used some balancing. But as far as playability, when it came to competitive ships, 3.4 was the patch that we all leaned on. And the problem is that since 3.5 came in, which was probably the worst implementation of a patch I've seen in the whole time I've played.
Was that the flight model change? Sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. But the problem wasn't just the flight model change. It was the fact that they did a real hack job on the game balancing. So of all the laser cannons, on all the ballistics, on missiles, shields, all of these came at the same time as flight, which is terrible for measuring because you can't measure flight up against previous stats in 3.4, and that's where it all fell apart. So the big problem here is that we have the only meta, or the only way to play right now, is to go ballistic weapons, to go through shield stats that haven't been thought about at all. And EMP is ridiculous up until the new patch on the PTU, but before was balanced. And I mean that in a sense that the arrow was king back in the day, but had a serious counterplay to EMPs and stuff like that. So there was this huge scissors, paper, rock meta between all the ships, and you could fly out and leave Port Olisar in PvP against anyone in anywhere between 20 ships. And for the last year, it's been only 2 ships. And that's because of the hack job that was the implementation of the flight model and the balancing of all the weapons and shields and missiles that happened. So the problem is that we've been there before, where there was so much more playability and PvP really existed. And now it's so limited and at the bottom of CRG's focus. So the state, to answer your question though, the state, it's just terrible. Like terrible. And
out of 10, what would you give it?
Anywhere near finished. I'd be, honest to God, it would have to be a 1. It'd be a 1.
Okay.
I'd be doing all the PvPers in this game a huge injustice if I gave it more than a 1.
Would you agree with that, Whitesnake? Not that I'm trying to pitch you guys against each other. I think that we're more trying to have constructive stuff.
I understand that perspective, and you caught me on a good day. I'm a lot less less agitated, probably because I just slept. So I don't know. I'll give it like a 2.
Okay.
Just because it's better than some previous versions, in my opinion.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's better than 3.4. I'm just like, I think it's improved a little bit. So if I gave it a 1 now, then I'd have to say it was a 0 before, and I don't even know that if that's allowed.
Sure. And I guess we'll start with Vergil for this one, since he made the post about it. And Vergil, if you can, link me the post so I can link it in chat. I was looking for it on Reddit and I just couldn't find it that quickly.
Sure.
What did prisons do to make PvP better? What did prisons do to make PvP better from a PvP standpoint?
Yeah, let me charge into this, and then you can criticize.
Sure.
So for me, it was kind of like, I mean, the problem was the ecosystem, right? Is that traders would go to Tremor, they go to Jump Town, and they'd put on all the risk. Twerk would put on all the risk when he would go mining, and then go to cash in at Port Olisar. And the problem is all the quote-unquote griefers, which I just call PvPers, which is what we should be calling them, but the PvPers had no risk. They were making no investment in killing players. And and what was super important about the prison is that finally there's some risk to playing a criminal or playing as a ganker or a PvPer. And so I think there's a bit of a trinity there, which is with the traders that have the risk when, they die, they lose X amount of hours of work. If you're a criminal or a PvP or a ganker in the PU, then, and you don't take down comrades and you don't strategize about how you play, then you have a consequence to dying as well, which is almost to scale with trading.
Well, but, and even if you do take down comrades, that is a consequence technically as well, because you have to go out of your way to do extra steps that you would normally have, right?
Yeah, which creates objectives in the PU, which is what we all want, right?
Sure.
For example, security Point Korea, like the station for clearing crimes, that had no significance until the last week, and now it's become a hotspot. So it's kind of like it's brought life to a lot of some systems that were just sitting there dormant.
Sure.
But that's what's so important, right? Is that now to gank people at Port Olisar, which anyone could have done with a $50 game package, now requires organization, it requires skill, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's still a bit of balancing there when it comes to it. And I think that there needs to be some sort of risk or investment for the bounty hunter, because that's the trinity. There's the traders, the miners, there's the gankers and the PvPers. And then the third one is the bounty hunters, which are going after the criminals, to which they don't have any consequences at all. You can, if you die to the bounty that you were trying to kill, you can come back, no consequence, and just keep going after them and kill them on the 5th attempt. So there needs to be a little bit of balancing for the bounty hunter, but it's a neat ecosystem that didn't exist before, and it was super one-sided towards the PvPer. So it's harder to be a PvPer now, and that's good.
Yeah, all right.
I agree with that. I think that there should be risk for bounty hunters and people who aren't criminals to just fly and fight recklessly.
It seems so simple to go, but maybe just there's something in the back end where they don't count these things. But just similarly, how you count a like a murder count, wouldn't it be cool if there was a counter to how many bounties that you gathered, whether NPC or player, and then the criminal side would trigger the same exact missions on the opposite? Right?
Yeah, so if lawful players went into unlawful space, they could be tracked, and
and then there's bounty missions that are given to PvPers on the pirate side as well, to kill security, to kill and to kill like just quote unquote lawful players. But Whitesnake, I was going to touch, since you're a mercenary org, obviously we're talking about prisons. How has, not necessarily prisons, but maybe a little bit, how have prisons and bounty hunting changed, and with prisons coming in 3.9, and what's the kind of feeling around that? Has it gotten better?
Well, I think a lot of people, and I wasn't sure at the time, I thought maybe that people would be criminals less often because they're avoiding it, or when they do get it, then somebody gets them, and then they're basically out of play for X amount of time.
Sure.
But I don't know if it's just because prisons are new and people kind of want to go there and do that gameplay a little bit, or if it's just some other side effect of the changes. But it seems anecdotally to me like there's more bounties, more criminals, more PvP going on, and more opportunities. That said, there's still plenty of nights I log on, and usually there's like 1 or 2 bounties, and they're just hanging out in armistice zones for an hour or whatever, or they're untrackable, which I understand probably has something to do with like the comm arrays, and there's just not much going on. So it really is kind of luck of the draw whether PvP is available, basically, unless you're a criminal and just running around killing people.
Yep. I think I understand the untrackable thing, because we just had one today. It definitely seems like it has something to do with the comm arrays. Like I went to Crusader, and once we got to Grimhex, which doesn't have a comm array, I actually saw the guy, and until he got into his ship and started flying away, that's when his marker came up for us. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of interesting, and maybe we could touch on that a little bit later. But Vergil, you mentioned skill. Is there skill in Star Citizen right now? Is there skill in PvP?
I would say there is as of the new patch,
Okay.
but for the previous week there wasn't. Just because EMP was so clearly broken, and it's only been broken for a week since the meta moved away from Pudolisar where it was working
Mm-hmm.
to now everywhere else where it wasn't working. But
Sure.
now that EMP's off it, I'd say yeah, it does. Is it anywhere near where it used to be? No, but it exists.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could 1v1 Risa right now and
Yeah.
to prove it.
What define skill then? What is it? Because obviously there's the subject of auto gimbals as well. So
Yeah.
define
So
skill
auto
in Star
gimbals
Citizen currently.
Yeah, so auto gimbals have been tuned down for certain. So auto gimbal tracking is nowhere near where it used to be when it was first introduced. So I would say, and it's more of a band-aid for networking now. You have to aim reasonably at a pip to still hit a target now. So yeah, we can still use the whole auto gimbal debate, and it definitely exists, and it makes a huge difference. But it's basically the only thing keeping combat playable at the moment. So,
Okay.
but I'd say when it comes to skill, you go to Arena Commander, and you verse some of the top guys in there. Most players, myself included, are going to lose 10 out of 10 of those fights against someone that's seasoned in there. And you do that through maneuvering your ship. If you roll in certain patterns and you strafe in certain patterns, you can make your pip super evasive, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'd say there is skill. I don't want to pretend as if there's a lot. The ceiling is super low,
Yeah.
and it's probably the lowest it's ever been, but it exists. Like, average players aren't going to beat good players that have A, figured out the meta this patch, and then B, are actually flying competitively. And you can fly competitively, but the skill ceiling is low, but it exists. It definitely exists.
Sure.
But
Go ahead. Go ahead.
to be good, it's about getting in targets' blind spots, knowing how to outmaneuver strafe limitations on some ships. Like a Gladius would know that it would want to top down on a Saber and keep out of its turn ratio, stuff like that. So there's small windows in which it exists, but yeah, like I said, the skill ceiling is low.
Would you agree, White? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
So I think that right now, due to the current state of combat balance, desync and everything, normally where, maneuvering and all that would be preferably where the skill was, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where it was in older versions of the game. I think right now the skill, and I hate using that word, but basically the experience with the game that you've had previously that helps you prevail in combat is mostly about three things. It's mostly about knowing what you have to do to get around the bugs,
Yeah.
and then knowing what the meta is, right? Knowing what things are unbalanced so that you can use those because you want to take every advantage you can. And then for some people, using bugs to your advantage.
Yeah.
So like that's where I think that when people in the PU are talking about skill, I think that's, and getting a leg up in combat, I think that's unfortunately where it is. It's not knowing how to maneuver or, knowing how to execute and intercept correctly or anything like that, just because of how messed up everything is right now. Now, like that isn't the worst thing in the world for a game that is in development. At least there's like some way that people who have dedicated the time can sort of show and take advantage of the fact that they know what's going on. But that's the way I see it right now in the PU.
Gotcha.
And the,
Go
and
ahead.
those it's super important to know too that those limitations are coming from the flight model. They're not coming from aiming at pips. Like the desync, yeah, of course, but a lot of the skill ceiling being completely lowered came with the nerf to the flight model. Like we don't have 6 degrees of freedom like we did previously in all these other patches. So there's no such thing as making evasive maneuvers to dodge incoming fire or anything along those lines. So a lot of the skill ceiling being lowered has to do with the state of the flight model.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to touch on real quick was the pip thing. and Whitesnake kind of touched on it as well, is I don't like using the word skill for reasons like that example, right? Where is it skillful to learn? Would you consider that an exploit? I don't want to use the word exploit unless it really is something bad, right? But is learning the way to kind of break... Listen, we should be able to break locks in this game. This is why it's such a touchy subject, right? Where, like, players creating PvP for themselves are called griefers. Are players learning the way the game works and taking advantage of it to do things that they probably should be able to do, considered an exploit? I'm not really sure. But, like, in my mind, that's sort of not really a skill, and it's more of learning how to break the game a little bit. Would you agree, disagree? Like, what do you think about my opinion on that?
Are you referring to the auto gimbal or the strafing patterns?
The strafe patterns to make your pip a little bit more difficult.
So the problem is, and I'll let you criticize this after. Why is with the severe limitations to flying your ship now? Because most of your thrust is centric and forward. So the problem is that because flight has been so dumbed down or restricted with the introduction of physics and this whole the expanse approach of flying our spaceships. The problem is that you're not flying in between asteroids anymore or having positional combat or getting angles on people.
Sure.
You are face to face shooting at each other with very little ability to outmaneuver each other. So the problem is that because of that, there's no consequence to flying your ship in this random fashion to move your pip around.
Yep.
Which is also why a lot of people back before, probably I'd say, I think it was this patch actually that in 3.9 that it got nerfed to a degree, but you could, a lot of people were just macroing their strafes.
Yeah.
And because you didn't need to avoid anything, you just wanted to make your pip harder to outmaneuver the gimbal assist. So people would just macro the strafe because it could be random. There was no consequence to flying that way. So that's the problem with. And no, it's not skill, but mind you, it's also been nerfed. You can't change direction with strafes. It's now incremental. So if I want to change my strafe from, left to right, then it incrementally thrusts instead of just instantly.
Mm-hmm.
So CIG, I've already looking at that, and for the most part, it's gone anyway.
Okay.
Now.
Whitesnake, you have anything?
I think maybe I have a different example, which I think might be a little easier to conceptualize. So you were talking about whether getting around a bug that you know about is an exploit or not. I think a good example is EMP, right?
Yeah.
So EMP was broken. Basically, I already screwed myself over by explaining it like that. Okay, so EMP, very unbalanced, right? There's a lot of issues with distortion damage in general with
Sure.
the netcode and everything. So EMP wasn't really effective. Like, people weren't really using it that much. But then there's this bug where basically in certain places in the PU, not in AC and not in certain places, but in certain locations in the PU, the EMP will go through the shield. It'll bypass the shields and it'll hit the hull and shut off everything. So of course players catch on to this and they're using it, and they consider that to be part of the skill of the game. Is basically using the EMP as intended, like you're supposed to use EMP in the way they were using it, but if it weren't for that bug, it would be unbalanced and basically not viable because of all the other imbalances and everything, right? So now, like, they have to fix this bug, right? So that EMP doesn't just penetrate shields because that's too easy. And now that is off the table. And so it depends on your perspective whether you consider using that known bug, knowing that it penetrates shields in certain locations when it's not supposed to, whether that is exploiting or if that is just knowing the game and knowing how to use it in its buggy state, or whether you're going to avoid that. So that's like kind of a tough call. I don't really have an answer, but like it's just a really complicated situation. There's a lot of things like that in the game right now.
Sure.
Yeah, but the problem also is if we wait for CIG to come and fix these bugs, then you'll be waiting years. For example, this EMP thing, this has been since 3.5, which is over a year now. The only difference between this patch and last patch, before everyone started to recognize it, was that Port Olisar was the meta for everybody to spawn at through character creation, to trade at, and now that it got nerfed either way, EMP's fixed in the last 24 hours. But the problem was the removal of Port Olisar. That's only when people woke up to the fact that EMP was even broken. So, but I can tell you right now, for the past year, it's been in this exact shape. Just nobody knew about it or really cared about it. It wasn't even until the Idris mission got announced that CIG even started talking about it publicly, and I think even found out about it, from what I understand. So...
yeah, that's the one good side of people seeing something that, is working a little bit too well for whatever reason and then using it a lot, is that then CIG sees it and they fix it. But in this case, fixing it actually removed a viable weapon type. I consider EMP a weapon.
For
it
sure.
basically removed a viable weapon type. So we're back to, basically missile meta in
yeah, it's completely written off. Like in the last 24 hours, it went from being incredibly overpowered to not worthy of selecting at all. So if you just bought a Hawk or a Sentinel like myself, you're probably selling it this week too.
Is that?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, is that something?
It's completely off. No, it's not competitive in any shape or form anymore at all.
Let's go into that a little bit. And I'm going to put you guys on the spot here, possibly. I don't know how you like to have your relationship with Star Citizen, if you like to keep things mostly positive, or if you like to speculate. So I like to speculate occasionally, and that doesn't mean that I think that this is exactly what's happening. I'm just going to play some devil's advocate here, okay? And it's with the Prowler, mostly. Is kind of where this starts to just come up again every time. Every time a new ship comes into the game, it tends to be really good in a combat scenario. The Prowler seems to be pretty good. Do we think they're doing this on purpose to sell ships, or do we? What do you think is going on here with this kind of thing? The Arrow was really great when the Arrow came in. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they're making meta ships, selling meta ships. Every single game does that. Like, you look at any MOBA, for example, the new champion's super good, and then they get nerfed a month in. So nothing surprising there. But I thought that the hard points for the Prowler and everything were decided years ago.
Okay.
Am I mistaken?
Probably not.
So,
yeah.
So what makes the Prowler powerful right now, in my opinion, is what I think is a bug. And that's that you can control the remote turret from the pilot seat.
Yeah, when it's more intended for that bottom seat, right?
Yeah, because if you experiment with like getting into the seats and getting into the top one and all that, you'll see that like something doesn't quite add up. Like it's not working as it's supposed to. I tested it a while back. I can't exactly remember, but it doesn't make sense. I'm pretty sure it's like a bug. Now, was this a bug that they didn't prioritize as much because, maybe they're like, oh,
we're selling.
Whatever, maybe it'll sell. Maybe it'll sell a little bit better. I don't know. I'm not gonna like say that without actually knowing. But I don't think that the main problem with the ship, in my opinion, is being able to control that turret when no other ship can do it. The pilot can't do that. The Vanguard, none of the other ships can do that. I guess technically the Super Hornet, but that's not exactly the same. So I think that's what it is, and I think that eventually they'll fix it. Who knows when, because it took them like a year to fix the Arrow extra shield.
Mm,
Yeah, it doesn't look like they're backing down from its offensive capabilities at all, though. I mean, the recent nerfs that just came in the last 24 hours are in regards to the hit points on the armor.
Yeah,
They're trying to make it.
but that's
They're trying to
just
nerf it defensively.
that, like, in terms of developer time, that's just changing a number in XML and
sure.
fixing the way the turrets work. I think that requires a little bit more.
But it's such a weird ship because they sell it as like highly maneuverable and agile, which makes it, isn't that sort of another thing that makes it pretty good in combat? And then now they're nerfing its defensive capabilities, which it's a drop ship, and that's what it should be, is highly defensible.
Well, we tested it and it's still got way more hull than any other ship its size. So it's not it's not as bad as it was before, but it's still pretty good.
Okay.
So they didn't nerf that too much. The acceleration, it's high for something that size, but it's really not that crazy. It seems like they intentionally made it a little bit better, but it's not like it's maneuvering around like a Hornet or something. I think it really is just the offensive. And yeah, sure, they sold it on having this turret and these forward guns, but I don't think that they sold it on the pilot being able to control all of them. So I think that's where it's getting its imbalance, in my opinion.
Yeah, but what's super important to note too is the Prowler for the last week has not been the best ship in the player universe. It's been the best ship in AC, but every EMP instantly turned it off. Like none of our guys were even allowed to fly them. They weren't good enough, those ships. So people complain about the ship. It did get nerfed. Like, for example, you could stack turrets, to which I'm sure you knew of, if you bought 3 of them. Equip the turrets to the side, and then you could double the hard points, etc. So that got nerfed, and defensively it got nerfed. So that makes sense. They should keep chipping away at it, because the problem is the other side of this coin is that they nerf it into the ground and nobody flies it. And like, I know that it's a drop ship, and that's everybody's argument on Twitter, is that this ship is supposed to be a drop ship. It's not supposed to be combat capable, but like, just let us enjoy the new ship. Like, nobody flies Vandal anymore. Why not have fun with it? I don't see the downside for this ship being strong. Should it be excessively strong, and to the point of ridiculous? No, but just let people have fun.
I agree with that, but at the same time, the way I look at Star Citizen is, how would you feel if my Prospector was the best combat ship? It's not the role for the ship. Ships are purchased for their roles, and we want the combat, because here's what it comes down to, and we'll discuss this in a little while, is a little bit about balance. How the hell are we going to balance this game with hundreds of ships if they don't have to look at their individual bundles? So, right, you have light fighters, medium fighters, heavy fighters, bombers, drop ships, mining ships, cargo ships, right? Everybody needs to be in their little bubble so they can be balanced within their bubble. Because if you have to balance everything as a whole against one another, I just don't think it's possible, right? So if you're I agree with you. Like, let's just enjoy the ship. Let's have fun. The ship is fun to play with. I'm having fun. That's what a game is all about. But if you look at it more from a macro standpoint, if we're bringing in dropships that are now a meta ship in PvP dogfighting combat, there's something wrong with that. And that's why people are saying that,
Yeah, and I completely agree. But I come from, all I do when I log on this game is PvP. That's all I'm here for. And the thing is the Prowler's been a breath of fresh air, because for the past year, the only competitive fighter at all has been the Gladius. The only ship. Anyone that has called themselves a PvP is a Gladius. They were in a Saber when the shield holes were patched for a 3-month window. But that's it. It was Gladius or bust. And there's maybe 20 or 30 combat ships which should be competitive. It should be a choice to pick one of these ships for their strengths or their weaknesses, and there hasn't been. And I I long for the day that Vandal ships are playable. I haven't even seen a Vandal ship in 9 months to even doing ECN missions. I don't even think you can do those in them. So that's what it is for me. It's just anything but the Gladius. But I completely agree, but the balancing would have to be there for 50 other ships as well. And if that was the case, if they did care about the stats that came with all these other ships, then yeah, write the Prowler off. But that's not the current state of the game. It's just Gladius or nothing. And now it's Gladius and the Prowler. So that's what I'm talking about.
All right, Whitesnake, what are we looking at here? I clicked this link and we're showing it on the screen.
So that's a screenshot for the spat. Like I said in the beginning, my org does a lot of testing, and we put it all in a spreadsheet. So the idea behind this is it's a little bit different from Urkel because as much of it as we can is based on in-game testing rather than like trying to derive the formulas behind the stats and all that.
Sure, because sometimes they can be incorrectly misunderstood. I mean, I've gone through some of the stats for mining, and it is not easy to try to determine exactly what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So this takes a little bit longer, and we mostly just have like the smaller ships in there right now. But we think that it can help in different ways. So like, for example, when you see acceleration on there, that's not something from the files. That's somebody goes into game and strafes forward and looks at the G meter and sees what it says.
Yeah.
Overheat resist is I'm boosting or afterburning forward how long before my mains overheat. Shields, like the things with shields and weapons is we just like go into game and we look at what's on the ship because sometimes that actually doesn't even match the stats matrix like with the Saber.
Yeah.
So this tool is open to the public. If you are on Google Drive, you make your own copy, and then the select ship at the top, you can just drop down, and there's like, I think it's like 30 ships or something.
Neat.
So I'll link that if that's all right with you.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll PM it to me as well on Discord, and I'll put it in the description. Same with your post, Vergil. Don't forget, so everybody can go to those things. All right, so we've talked about like a lot of the issues, and one of the biggest ones that we've spoken about is the and Vergil's really touched on it, is the fact that only a couple ships are viable. How do we fix this stuff? How do we fix this?
It's literally, and this is the scary part, right? It's a priority and it's a management problem because all these are XML pages, XML documents with attributes to them that just need some rough idea of balancing, which has been the case in the past. Like balance existed in the past, and you could see that through scissors, paper, rock meta that happened, and there were 30 ships viable in the past.
Explain
this
some
is
of
just
that.
XML.
What was some of the paper, like rock, scissors stuff?
So the arrow, the Gladius, in a meta where you had to actually aim at pips, I know that used to exist before auto gimbal, but yeah, exactly. But back then, a huge problem was the arrow and the Gladius because they had 3 hard points, which is almost the amount of the Saber. It's 3 instead of 4. But the ship is 1/3 of the profile, meaning it was a mosquito ship to try and aim at. Now, the balancing for that was that these smaller ships with the 1 power plant were super susceptible to EMP. So the Saber Raven, the Hawk, would completely counter the arrow, the Gladius. And also the shields on the Vandal ships were, you couldn't rotate them out until the last 24 hours, to which they fixed it in the last 24 hours, but you couldn't change to have meta shields. So a Saber Raven could instantly turn off a glaive, and the same for a scythe. Okay. Now, the thing about the scythe and the glaive, whether this was intentional or not, was that as you shot at them, they would deconstruct. So you could clip the wings of a glaive off, right? So the way it worked was the alpha damage of a glaive was twice that of a Saber. And its defenses were half that of a Saber. The Saber had 3 shields, half the damage of the glaive. The glaive had half the shields of the Saber, but twice the damage. So it was literally a part of the strategy when you were versing Vandal ships was to either EMP them and just straight up try to kill them before they would get one volley off on you and you would die, or to clip off their wings to make them a manageable target that you wouldn't have to worry about getting instantly destroyed by, and stuff like that. And then there was some deeper stuff like stealth and etc. But there was legitimate compositions that organizations would run that would require actual strategy and research. You'd have to pick a combination of ships to go down to Jumptown with.
Okay.
So it existed. We haven't seen the Saber Raven. Nobody's flying Saber Ravens competitively for the past year, and if you're doing it, you're tying both hands behind your back. It's the same with the Vandal ships. All three of the Vandal ships were viable back then. Now they're completely written off. And yes, they're written off because you can't aim at pips anymore because the weapons
slow firing,
aren't
right?
Yeah, but the problem is this could be balanced. That's the most disappointing thing about it. Yes, it's super hard to aim fixed weapons through pips because of the desync and the tick rate on the server, but all they would have to do is scale the damage to accommodate for how hard it is to hit at these targets. Because if anyone remembers in the earlier 3X patches, you would only land 1 in 20 hits, but the 1 in 20 hit was devastating. So if you double or even triple the alpha damage of a Vandal ship, yes, it's going to be a nightmare trying to hit that target still, but when you do, it's going to be the most rewarding thing ever. So that's the thing, is you can balance the game around these broken mechanics, but they're not interested in that. And the problem is that comes at a cost of gameplay. So we're all sitting waiting for these systems to come, and nobody flies anything besides a Gladius because of that.
Yeah.
And from what I've been told by CIG, the conversations I've had, I don't want to mention names or anything because I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but they see that, and I think from a project management standpoint, they're starting to reevaluate combat and flight. But the timeline I've gotten from that is horrendous. I think it's 6 months until we'll start seeing the actual fruits of their labor, and that'll only be step one.
Okay. Well, Whitesnake, going back to the question, because we went into a lot there with Vergil, is...
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's great. I'm not saying it as a bad thing. The what are the solutions? How do we fix the imbalance of the amount of ships that are viable in the game?
They just have to rework everything. They have to start at, just peel everything back and
from
rework everything one
flight
thing at a
model
time.
from ground zero. You think that much?
Well, I know that you guys have talked about this a lot. It depends on what you mean by the flight model.
Yeah.
In terms of the physics programming with the IFCS, I don't think that's too far off. There's some stuff that I know that they're already planning on, like high-speed combat. I would consider that a flight model change.
Okay.
But mostly, I don't think that's necessarily so bad. I think that it's in terms of ship balance and weapon balance, they just got to strip everything off and rework everything one at a time. That's a lot of developer resources.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope the vehicle experience team is working on it.
But just quickly, that's my problem with this whole thing is when you run a game database, which is what we do, similar to Star Citizen DB and stuff, and you actually look at these game files, it's just an XML page with some attributes. These are just numbers that needed to be changed. For example, how long do you think you've been complaining about the mass driver for Twerk? Sorry, Mike.
I don't know. I think last patch it really felt bad, but it was probably 2 to 3 patches before that, so anywhere between 6 and 9 months.
Yeah. Now, the only change that has happened to that in the last month is one number. A 3 got changed to a 2 in one file.
Yeah.
That's it. A 3 to a 2 fixed it in 9 months.
Yeah. Well, it was two different kinds of mash drivers. So I guess
so two numbers from a 3 to a 2. But that's the point. Is
it takes such little effort with such gigantic return.
So why is it not happening? What's
Right,
the issue here?
Exactly.
So we begged them for the mass driver change, and I think that it wasn't. I think that was something they sort of did just because they realized how much everything else is getting pushed back.
Yeah.
So just to like sort of make things more playable. But I think that you can say like it's just changing numbers in an XML, but you can see how quickly like stuff kind of, it's like they nerf mass drivers, but then some people are saying, oh, well, what about this weapon? What about these shields, right? And it just kind of spiderwebs out from that. And then you've got a lot of developers spending a lot of time balancing mechanics that I don't think that they want to balance right now. As much as it pains me to say that, because I was always on the side of like, we need to have good gameplay now so we can get people testing.
It's a fair argument.
Yeah, but
I think it's
like,
somewhat fair.
So there, it just becomes this massive thing. And like, for example, why spend the time to balance shields other than to just nerf all of them into the ground, which they've done a couple times, when we know that they're going to like completely redo shields, because they've said publicly, we are not happy with shields at all. We know, almost like begging us to stop complaining about it. I don't think it's on the roadmap, like I have no idea when it's going to happen. So we're going to have to stick with missiles or shields being bad. Sorry, I think I said shields, but I meant missiles. Both of them are in the exact same spot, in my opinion.
But that's not...
Yeah, good.
But the problem is that, like, for example, to balance these shields, if you interviewed any single player that PvPs on a regular basis, they could tell you, oh yeah, the problem with the size 1 shields was the regeneration stat. You go to Star System DB, any casual player could go, oh, this is the one attribute that is broken and makes these shields so ridiculous. I think the return of investment on the work it would take to fix this and balance this game, even just roughly, the return would be tenfold. If they were to go and double or triple the size of the alpha damage for Vandal ships, which would make Vandal ships at least competitive, think about the money made. You'd be turning one guy's work. It would take him at maximum 1 hour to fix the weapons on the Vandal. And then think about how much money you make by selling Vandal ships immediately just because of that.
Okay, but he has to know to fix them. And we have this vehicle experience team now. And like this is I'm seeing like little arguments in chat, right? That it's allocation of resources, things like that. They've allocated the resources to this subject. End of story. There is a team dedicated to this. I meme about it because it is ridiculous. It's the first change they made was changing the third person camera. Like, you got to be kidding me with that stuff, right? But then next, from people who engage with PvP combat without going into any sort of NDA issues, because I know there could be some. Obviously, like, I've been around the block and I have my own. It's the only way they know that there are issues is if they are playing the game themselves, which, let's be realistic here, they probably don't have that much time to do that. So the only other way is gathering feedback from the community. And Bayer is one of the greatest people I've ever come across. This guy's a man. But is Bayer and are they doing a sufficient job for you guys, coming from your perspective? Because I think the most important feedback is getting this right, because like I said before, if PvP isn't balanced even, and we've talked about this, Vergil, on your podcast even, it's not just about balancing PvP between combat ships, it's also making the experience for the trader and the miner and any other economy style gameplay to be decently fun as well. Are they interacting with you guys at all? How are they gathering this feedback? Is that the issue? Is the issue not the time it takes to fix it? Is the issue the time it takes to realize that it's a problem?
Bayor and a few other developers like him, in my opinion, might be what saves the game's
Yeah,
PvP scene.
I agree. I think it might be what saves the game, period. Period.
See,
If
yeah,
they're interacting enough, if you are getting that engagement.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's next. I think there's next to none. I don't think there's
Okay.
any communication between the active PvP community and the developers. And I think if it is, it's super restricted to management's decisions. But speak for, at least 100, 200 people that have zero communication with Bayer and CRG are not even interested in speaking to. So, no, I don't think. I don't think they're even interested in getting feedback. And from what I understand, is their story is we don't want to do work twice. So if they balance now, then down the track, they're gonna do shield tech and then have to do all these values again. But the problem is the in between is like, how long has shield tech been postponed, and how long has combat been unplayable in the meantime?
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? Is like, and for example, these huge streamers are coming over with 20,000 viewers. We're playing this. This is a game right now. I know it's alpha, it's a project and stuff, but we're selling ships, we're flying these things, we're shooting at other spaceships. People are judging the experience off of what they're playing. And some people are going to play this game, experience it, and walk away. I think we need to stop making excuses for the little amount of work and the very obvious amount of work that would be required to fix combat and make PvP, which is a huge pillar of this game. Not saying it's mandatory, but it
absolutely is a pillar.
I really want to beat this drum. Is I think the work that would need to be done to make 20 more ships playable and PvP just even a little bit reasonable, Mike, would not take long at all. Like,
I agree, but the argument that the quote unquote argument that I'm making is how do you get them to hear your drum? Because I think that's the issue. Yeah, maybe something like this, right? I don't like I typically don't look at my view count when I'm streaming, but today I am, and there's a lot more people here than normally are. So to say that this isn't something important, and then at the same time, when you mention the idea of let's make more ships viable, like this is directly in their interest in so many ways. Like the game is selling record numbers of ships nowadays because the game is selling itself. I think the state of the game overall is better than it's been in ever. I mean, it continues to get better. It continues to look better. Be slightly more stable in some cases. There's more things to do, and one of the things that struggles the most is combat, right? And when we make those combat ships viable, which is the bulk of the ships in the game, you sell more ships. Like this is directly in their best interests to do. So it's just a matter of figuring out what the disconnect and why it's not happening, and maybe it's something we won't know. I mean, you mentioned that there is some changes coming, and you don't like the timeline necessarily, but the whole thing is how do we as the players improve it? Because that's all we can do at this point. It's we come in and we play the game, but there is not really a game to play yet. So it's just what our goal in some ways is how do we make sure that when it is time to play, that this game is really fun, you know?
I think it's got to do with the feedback that we give CIG. I think that all, like, they're looking at how much ships they're selling each month. They're looking at profit and stuff like that. And I don't think the criticism or the feedback they're getting in regards to combat doesn't reflect the poor shape of what it's in. I think. Oh,
you're saying you think because they're. I'm sorry. You're saying because you think that they're making so much and doing these record numbers that they feel that the game is in a better state than it's actually in.
That it justifies their direction. Yep. And they look at what ships they're selling, because a lot of the people that are buying these ships aren't actually logging into the game.
That's 100%. They may be, but not for very long. I think that's 100% true. The Star Citizen community is very much an echo chamber where like I'm looked at in a lot of cases as like a negative person and not a great person for the game overall because I'm not looking at it in the way that they look at it, right? But overall, if you, and I've mentioned this many times on my live stream, there's some massive communities on Twitch, just on Twitch, that I've seen talk about Star Citizen, and instantly it's KEKW, Omega Lol, like this is the game's a scam, the game's a joke. Like that's how people look at this game outside of our little bubble. You know what I mean? So it's like not everybody looks at it that way, but there are a lot of people who do, and that's some of the reason why, you know? I think is that they come in and their experiences aren't great. But let's get White in here. What do you think about any of the things that we're touching on here? How do we do this better? I mean, you guys are constantly testing, and you say, you know, Bayor's really great. I'm not putting Bayor down because, again, I agree with you that this is really important. But if Vergil feels that these fixes are kind of quick, do you agree with them? And how do we make sure that they understand some of the issues? Again, I'm very much sitting on the outside here, so I'm listening to you guys and trying to take in what you're saying and trying to figure out how do we make this better.
As painful as it is, I think we just got to keep doing what we're doing, which is I'm hoping that means whenever there's feedback threads, if you're all right, so I'm gonna do a little soapbox here.
Go, stand on it, baby.
If you have major complaints about something in the game, and whenever those quarterly feedback threads go up, you don't have yourself in there.
Excuse me.
Then, you know, you're not utilizing whether you like it or not, what CIG decided is the main feedback mechanism.
Yeah.
And if you know about bugs and you aren't putting them in issue council, then my opinion, or you're not contributing to when they're already in issue council, in my opinion, you know, you should maybe like consider not complaining as much about them. But if you put them in issue council and you put your feedback on Spectrum, then in my opinion, you have all the right to complain, you know, because it's a lot of like, I think I posted missiles as the #1 buggiest, most annoying thing, like 5 quarters in a row or something. And it, like every time I would just link to my previous post, and I'm like, well, you know, like you change like this one little thing, but they're still messed up. And here's still all the things wrong with them.
What are you referring to when you mean that we're messed up?
So, all right. I mean, you guys want
like
me to go into
spamming all the missiles at once, or you mean the earlier 3X patches where they weren't landing, or to what are you complaining about exactly?
In my opinion, and I didn't mean to like get too detailed here into one thing, but every part of missile gameplay, is frustrating. So from buying a missile and not being able to see any stats, equipping missiles, trying to lock missiles, which is often buggy, knowing how many missiles and what kinds are locked, being able to control the priority of missiles, knowing when missiles are launched at you, like everything I think is frustrating. And that's not even getting into like the effectiveness of missiles, how they've gone back and forth between super OP and not really that useful, because in my opinion, like from a gameplay perspective, it needs to be more engaging, because you have, compared to like shooting something with a gun is like a very intensive, you know, you have to aim. Even with auto gimbals, you have to aim. With missiles, it's just sort of like pressing a button, and those things have never really mixed very well. They're planning on, you know, doing a bunch of stuff, supposedly. It's not on the roadmap, but we've heard them talk about it on stream with missiles when we ask about it. So
they know it's an issue, yeah.
Yeah. So like, but
for some reason it doesn't get fixed.
Yeah.
But we don't have the real reasons why, right?
Well, I think that like they're prioritizing everything, right? So I think that that's probably why they haven't been fixed, is because other things are more pressing. But like I didn't mean to like go into like complaining about missiles the whole time. But
that
like
wasn't,
that's an
you took a
example
couple
of,
minutes, but that's a big problem with the game. I mean, you didn't even mention the fact that you can't countermeasure them off still.
Yeah.
Like there's so many problems with it.
But there's spectrum threads where you can put this, right? So like if you're not putting it on the spectrum threads, then I don't know what you're doing.
I agree with that too. Like Vergil said, what do? We do these podcasts, but it like I'll tell a quick little story here before we continue on with the conversation. Is I went to Gamescom in 2016, and at the end of it, they brought us onto the stage to thank us for coming out. And Chris Roberts was like, "Hey, this is Bad News Baron. Welcome. You know, thank you very much, Bad News Baron. Welcome. Thank you very much, DJ Knight." And then he came to me and he goes, "Who are you?" Right? Like he didn't know who I was, and that's okay. But the fact of the matter is when it comes down to giving feedback, is the expectation for the dev to see us here on Twitch or on YouTube is much lower than that feedback thread, like Whitesnake is saying. So if we have a problem with any part of the game, it sucks because Spectrum isn't the greatest place in the world to be. That's the place to do it, right? Like you're gonna say your complaint and you might get shit on because somebody doesn't agree with you or whatever, right? And then they all jump in. I know how this goes, but that's where the feedback goes, because that's the only way it's seen.
Yeah, but the problem is too is like customers that are going to Spectrum are already customers. People that are watching Twitch, this is directly affecting their marketing. So if we're openly talking about the terrible shape of combat in their biggest marketing tool ever, then that's where you're going to get the attention. At least they'd be a smart company to pay attention to how they're perceived on Twitch.
That's different. Yeah, I think that's Xylo's job, right? Is the
there he is. Speak of the devil.
Oh, really? Just popped in. We'll read what Xylo said in 1 second. I'll make sure I save it here. That's more like Xylo and the community team's job, whereas Bayor's job, I guess let's just use Bayor. I'm sure there's many people other than just Bayor that are dealing with this, is to gather the feedback and who makes the feedback thread, right? So if we want to speed up the time and all of that, like that's probably one of the better places to do that. But Xylo says they're still getting mountains of feedback from Twitch, even if they don't sit and watch the stream. We have people dedicated to gathering feedback from all platforms, including Twitch. They deliver it into a dev. They deliver it to a dev in a way that's easy to digest, though, not Twitch clips. Okay, so let's touch on that a little bit too. And welcome, Xylo. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. Is one of the devs was here. And I read it earlier, and Elliot, I'm sorry, I forgot. Elliot's been on the mission team, has been making some missions that we recently played in like 3.9 and previously. And we've seen him on ISC and stuff like that too. And he asked a specific question, so let's ask you guys, since you are versed in these subjects. Can the mission team help make the state of PvP better in any way? And how?
Wait, tough. Is that
that's a question to you guys? Yeah.
I have no idea.
Sorry, can the mission team help with combat? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or PvP.
I think combat probably not, because combat's completely separate of objectives. But I can tell that the comm arrays and how they're interacting with the way the PU and the ecosystem works in game is. Super good. If any of the guys developed it are in your chat right now, I'm super thankful for the gameplay that's come out of that. So I think 100% the answer is yes for PvP, 0 for no, 0% for combat itself. But yeah, of course, absolutely. Like, the drug lab, you increase one commodity at one location, and then all of a sudden you've created King of the Hill for PvP.
Yeah.
So yeah, without a doubt, they can have huge impacts on the game, and have in the past and are doing so right now. So yeah, 100% PvP bounty missions, etc. Definitely 100%. And they're doing such a good job. Like that, the whole fleshed out ecosystem, the prison, like and I don't want to loop back on your the previous earlier questions, but like, you know, the fact that I am so terrified of going to prison is why I'm sweating and screaming when I'm trying to clear my crime stat at SPK, because I don't want to go to prison for 13 hours and have to mine. Right. So, and that's because of the mission guys. That's not because the flight experience team had anything to do with it. Right. So
it's the mission guys' job, I guess, to create hotspots in space. Well, it's the mission team and I guess the economy team, right? Because the original hotspot was Jumptown. That was based on commodity prices. But the mission team can do the same thing. I mean, they've done plenty of missions that have counter missions to them. I think just making more macro style counter missions, maybe, where more, instead of only one person being able to take it necessarily. I think mission sharing helps too, but to bring people all into one area to fight over a certain thing is big. I just think that there's a lot of pieces of Star Citizen that the puzzle pieces aren't there yet. Like, one thing we haven't mentioned is, you know, what would make PvP better? I mean, I think being able to not just blow people up and to be able to disable them, board their ship, loot their ship, you know, those things. Those are huge pieces of the puzzle that we just don't have yet. That would almost make the glaring
piracy.
Yeah, of course. It would. I feel like it would make almost the glaring issues with actual combat be less of a problem if there were more reasons to do it.
So that would increase the frequency of PvP happening, which would increase the likelihood of people seeing all the issues. And being basically overwhelmed by them and lose a ship, possibly lose cargo because of them. And I think that would maybe increase salt a lot.
And in this case, is salt good? I guess I think it is, probably, right?
Maybe.
I think that their contribution to like combat in general has been super good though. Like the feedback for the mission guys, and I'm not just saying this because they're in the stream, is super high. Like, you know, the comma raise, the clearing your crime stat to hack it, the paying your fines, you know, the prison system. Oh, it's all so good, man. It's super good. And it's the thing is too, is you can see that it's there to accommodate the fact that we have 50 player limitations right now. Because if we didn't have bounty hunting missions, we didn't have, you know, working crime stat prisons and stuff, we would never be even running into each other. So we're leaning on bounty hunter missions right now. And I know this isn't where bounty hunter missions will be when this game goes live. They'll be far different, but it's the glue that's holding PvP together right now.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, definitely.
Sure. I guess we're coming towards the end. So real quick, I didn't mention this the entire stream, so I probably should have. If you guys want to pop in and ask any questions or have any statements that you want to make, feel free to jump in the green room and we'll start sorting you guys through. I think there's one person there. If any mods are there and they want to help out sorting, that would be awesome. And we'll kind of, you know, go into that style. So let me ask like one more question that's really broad and probably difficult to answer. But
I've got one too after.
Go for it. No, yeah, please. That's what I want this to be a very casual conversation. I don't have to like play the host necessarily.
You first or me first?
I'll go first. No, you go first. You go first because my question's kind of stupid. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you know, in comparison to combat in the game previously, which I know a lot of people lean back to earlier versions of it, you know, the early 3X patches, the early 2X patches being in the state that they were, and then the state that it is now, do you think that coincides with the release of Squadron 42 anytime soon? Because say Squadron 42 beta comes out in 2020, do you think that combat is in anywhere near shape that it needs to be for people to play this in Squadron 42? And does it concern you with how many steps it feels we've taken back, yet we're supposed to be even closer to a deliverable campaign game with this combat? Would you, like, do you follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Does it concern you how far away we are from playable PvP and combat, and how much closer we're supposed to be with Squadron 42, because that's something that always scared me about this entire project was, I look at game development from other games like, God of War and stuff. And before God of War even had color in its game, before they had even created environments or levels, they had the combat down in the gray box phase. And now we're looking at combat for the fourth or fifth time, and the third year on Lumberyard, and the sixth year in development. Does it concern you that we're at the third or fourth iteration, and it feels like we're the furthest behind than we've ever been?
Go ahead, White. I'll let you start.
Well, I've been playing this game for 6 years, since 2014 now, and I gotta tell you, the only way to survive is to not worry about that stuff and just play the game and enjoy it if you can, and try to add feedback if you're not enjoying it. Trying to think about timelines and when CIG is going to release Squadron 42 or anything like that. I mean, I'd be more concerned if they weren't making money, but they continue to make more and more money. Yeah. So they can continue to fund develop. I don't see that as a bad thing. That means there's interest.
Yeah,
they
of course.
Can continue to fund development. So I just learned a long time ago to try to focus on enjoying the game that I have right now, even as bare bones as it was back then, and with all the issues that there are now, and to not worry about timelines.
Yeah, I don't necessarily worry about the timeline. I take what Vergil says and I go, here's the thing. For me, and I've said this a few times, is Squadron 42 needs to come out so the focus can shift more towards the game Star Citizen, I think. Whether it's focused from development, I don't know. Listen, I don't know how this stuff works, but my assumption is that some people, because one thing I do know is people definitely have been pulled from Star Citizen development into Squadron 42 development, so why wouldn't it happen the other way? And when that's done, I assume there's going to be some people pulled over to Star Citizen. And when the focus shifts to that, I think we'll actually start to see more of a change and more quick development work, hopefully. And I think that...
You don't think...
Go ahead.
You don't think they'll go on to episode 2 or whatever?
I do, but I don't think necessarily... I don't think you're going to see... I don't think it's going to be as much of a focus, at least for a certain period of time, right? Because just as, all right, guys, listen, we got to get Squadron out, right? So now the focus has shifted on that because it's been too long. And when Squadron comes out, there's going to be a time where people play it. I don't think it's directly going to go right back into Squadron 42 Part 2 development, as many people on it, right? I think they'll continue, and I think, some people will leave, some people will stay, so on. That's what's going to happen. But in general, where I'm going with my comment is that I look at the state of combat, and I look at the state of the game overall, whether it's, an EVA, on foot, in flight, all those things, is the state of the game now. That Squadron's not ready. And for me is when I start seeing changes happen to combat more, that's how I know Squadron's getting closer. But I kind of agree with White. If we're worried about things, you're going to worry yourself to death. And, we've been around so long that it's just... Yeah, I mean, I consistently get stressed out occasionally by these things, but I try not to, because I know that if you do, then it's just going to be frustrating. So I try to enjoy what we have now, but also still look forward to the future and say, a lot of this stuff's got to get done. It's got to get, and you just prioritize what's important, I don't know, but that's just me. But all right, we have a couple people that are joining us now, so let's see what a couple of these guys have to say. So this is Blazemonger. So Blaze, welcome. I don't have any labels to say that you popped on the show. I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, turn us down a little bit though, because there's a bit of an echo. More than a bit.
Yeah, very loud.
More than a bit.
What's up, Blaze?
We should be good now.
Test? No, you're horrible.
Okay, hang on.
I'm gonna head you out and get it squared away. Yeah, we can't have that. Bribe at Guntails, welcome, man. Do you have headphones, Bribe?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hey, Brad.
What's up, dude? So what do you got to say about the whole subject?
Well, the state of PvP. Well, I know it's incomplete for sure.
Sure.
What I believe is a much better state for PvP is when ships no longer have HP bars, when we have systemic damage and destruction, and when killing your enemy the is not the immediate result of combat.
Sure. But isn't the I agree with you, don't get me wrong, but isn't the general idea of the way combat works, I shoot, you get hurt, we fly around each other. Doesn't that not necessarily those extra bits of features to make things more cool? I feel like that's more of the rule of cool than the rule of fun.
Perhaps, or perhaps. Well, I guess it depends. If you want to actually kill your target, like say pirates that are recklessly attacking a trade convoy, yeah, sure, you want to, well, at least stop them from becoming a threat, which can be as little as incapacitating them to as much as completely killing the pilot and the ship.
Sure. Okay.
But do you think that combat should be held hostage until that gets delivered?
That's a good question. I mean,
well,
that's
I
sort of
guess
the
as a
argument
case-
here today, right?
Well, I guess that's a question of do you want to keep putting in more resources into improving this current iteration of combat, or do you
Yup.
want to save your resources on working on the next version and then delivering that? Like how optimization is not as useful now as it will be later.
Yeah, for me, it's yes. I think they need to put in band-aids immediately, and just because it only helps everybody for the game to be more playable immediately, at least to a reasonable degree. I'm not saying that they need to be full-on solutions, but I think band-aids like there's opportunities here when people like Lyric come into the game and they bring 20,000 viewers in here and they quantum to Hurston and they go do box missions and stuff, but you throw them in some sort of pirate mission or something with a really enjoyable combat, and you've then sold another 5,000 players. So I think the idea of making combat playable immediately helps. I'm not against the game you're describing. If anything, I like that direction, but I just don't like to see that get used as an excuse for the core of the gameplay of this game to be in the poor shape that it's in. But I agree. I look forward to when that day comes.
Yeah. You got anything else you want to add, Brad? Champ? Okay. Well, I guess that's it for Brad. Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm with you though, Virgil, in some cases, but in the others, it's like they have to be very small band-aids with a lot of this stuff.
Just the tribute changes is it all it's for me. I'm not asking, like, I wouldn't.
Oh, he said his
I'm not
Discord
asking
broke.
for artwork, nothing like that. Yeah, just strictly attributes. That's it. Just numbers.
Sure. And it just comes down to getting the feedback and them understanding that feedback, I guess, as valid. I guess it took a little while for things like the cannons, right? For them to just say, okay,
Mass
good enough.
drivers.
Mass drivers, yeah, sorry. So Blaze, are we better now?
I think we are, yes.
Yay! All right, welcome, man. So what do you want to add?
I mean, as you know, I'm actually coming from the EVE world and the EVE environment.
Sure.
Where a lot of the things that are happening now happened many, many moons ago. So what happens in EVE, and some people may know and some may not, is there is a group of players who get elected into a special feedback group
The TSM.
that talks yes. So while it may be early for a game like Star Citizen to have such an institution in place, what I see is there's a lot of scattered comments. There's a lot of feedback. Some informed, some less informed. And when there's no real focus on that feedback, it has a hard time getting through to the people it needs to get to.
Yeah.
So if CIG is not yet ready, because I'm pretty sure that they're thinking of something like that because it will benefit the game. How would it be if players themselves start organizing and giving more focused feedback to people who might be able to push that through, instead of having a session which is beneficial and which is useful like this one?
Yeah.
And then, but it's still outside of the direct visibility and influence of CIG. Obviously, there's some devs that
I
watch
think it's
and are in
dangerous.
chat.
I think it's dangerous, and Vergil, I'll use you as a negative example, and I apologize if you take it the wrong way, but I don't mean it in a bad way, really. But when I came onto your podcast, all of the discussion was sort of an echo chamber. It felt a little bit, where a lot of the discussion was based around how is our experience going to be better, and it wasn't necessarily how the overall game experience would be better. And when I came there, I was like, wait, well, what about me and my little mining ship? How does what you're discussing affect me positively? Where, it needs to have a knock-on for all of us. And that's the issue that I take with, like, all right, let's get Whitesnake, Vergil, and all their friends into a big group, and let's have them discuss combat. And will any of those people have my interests in mind? That's the only thing that I take a little bit of, like, I don't like the idea of having the high council of people deciding how this game is going to be played.
And here's the flip side that to that, and an experience I had when 3.5 first came out, right, was in 3.5, the flight model comes out. Now, within 24 hours, and this is going to be a really interesting spin, I think you're going to find interesting, but when the feedback thread got created, everyone was super eager to get into there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem with Spectrum, which I think is a huge problem when it comes to feedback and getting questions up on the SC official streams and stuff, is that when you upvote on Spectrum, there's no decay mechanic like in Reddit, how you can something that becomes popular can just as easily become unpopular and fall down the ranks. There's no ranking system. It's first in, gets the most attention, gets the most upvoted. And so if you contribute to the feedback thread, say 5 days later, then you're not going to get seen by 80% of the people that have already left. And there's nothing decaying to make these opinions fall down in ranking. Now, the problem is when that thread first came out, players, probably like yourself, picked up the Caterpillar, flew it and went, oh man, this experience is so great I love the weight of my ship. I feel so immersed in my ship. It's so great. This flight model's, amazing. And then myself, after 3 or 4 days, I keep hitting the wall in Arena Commander because the drift is so bad. So the problem is I think that when you give every single person a voice, I think that you get feedback on people that haven't necessarily tested it or are experienced in the matter in which they're describing.
Holy shit, dude, the amount of people that, like, let's just take an example of, like, a YouTube video. They just read the title and they comment.
Exactly.
And I know they can, because my titles are pretty, like, clickbaity, right? So I know they just take the clickbait and read the comment. They don't watch the actual content of the video, right? Is because, like, I mean, it's YouTube. You have to clickbait if you want to get views. There's no way around it, right? So it's exhausting, and that's the thing is that sometimes you're getting the wrong feedback, and the first person who jumps in is the one who gets the upvotes. If it sounds reasonably good for Johnny and Jake, they go ahead and I just named random people. I know there's Johnny and Jakes that work at CIG. I'm not talking about those people. But yeah.
And that's the thing. And to loop back on what you're describing, Blaze, to get back to your answer, is the CSM players are elected. So you can rest assured, Mike, that you've elected, or at least the people have elected this person to represent you when it comes to the developers and discussions with it. So if you want to be heard, you vote for someone that's going to make you feel like you've been heard. And then also you can rest assured that the guy who's been elected and then gets the position is experienced enough to give them the right information.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what it is for me, because I just worry about when everybody gets to contribute feedback, usually the results aren't exactly correct, and they're corrupted by, for example, the voting system in Spectrum and stuff like that. Because and I really want to hammer that in the 3.5.
Sure.
You could probably go back in Spectrum and look at that thread. Some of the upvotes right now make zero sense to how we all feel about the flight model now. And the problem is someone can, like I said, hop in their freelance and have this amazing time and give feedback on how great it was flying the freelancer, to which someone in a Gladius didn't get the upvotes and had a 5-page essay on the subject that never got the attention. So.
Yeah, and for me, and what Vergil says there actually makes sense to me, because for me personally, I haven't the faintest idea about PvP. I understand like the basics. I'm really terrible at it. I don't mind being shot to hell. That's part of the deal in what I like to do in game. So that's not the problem. If there is a threat, there's too many people who will comment and post something or upvote just for the hell of it, or just because they think they understand what they're talking about, or they think they understand what's being said. I stay out of these discussions there because I don't know. But I do realize and understand that people like Vergil and Whitesnake would be people who would be able to provide input and feedback that is sensible, and it does provide something for a developer to work with. So that's part of the deal. Bring those people together in a constructive way with the developer to try and get that information direct. And then you can have an up and down. You can bring your concern to the table. The developer can say, well, you can say that, but this is why it's currently this way. You can do that under NDA if you have to. And for me, that would actually make sense and would probably allow mechanics and changes to be more refined and more direct at first iteration.
Sure.
I think I don't know much about how Eve does it. I mean, if they're doing it, it must be working for them. But I think that if you had elections in Star Citizen, you'd end up with the leaders or designated people
Test Squadron
from large
would be
orgs.
representative.
Yeah,
more often
and then,
than anyone else.
Larger streamers probably too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, and I'm not at all claiming like I would be a good person to be on one of these things. I'm actually not that great at PvP, but I don't know if you'd get the people that I think Blazer would want on that by doing it with elections. I don't know how Eve does it. Maybe they have some way of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I'd just add that I agree that like Spectrum isn't perfect, but I think it's what we got right now.
Yeah.
So I find I have success when like just technique is I put in like a few initial comments, like my first impression, and then I go back later and I edit in all my testing and my analysis, and I make sure it's worded properly and all that. And it tends to do well when I do that. That's kind of playing the game, but I think that form of feedback is more helpful when it's like that too.
And from what I understand too, is they have some focused feedback groups that are tied to NDAs and stuff. So I think it's happening anyway to a degree behind closed doors. But I agree, like a system like that, is it too early? Maybe.
I don't think so.
Could it serve the community? Yeah, I'm not too sure. Like that's one thing I would be concerned of is like, does just some guy from Test I've never heard of get elected because just through sheer numbers and upvotes? But it's something that could definitely serve this game immensely down the track, 100%.
Sure.
But that's a really good question, man. Really.
Oh, and people always think I hate Test, by the way. Test is just huge. So that's whenever we use the possible brigade scenario, not that I don't think they've ever really done anything like that. It's just a possibility. Okay. So sorry, any Test Squadron people. I don't hate you. I have a Test Squadron hoodie. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Blaze,
okay.
anything else you want to add before we let you go and go to the next caller?
No, that was just it. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Good question, man.
Yeah,
Good question.
man. Appreciate it.
All right. Later.
Later, dude.
All right.
See you.
All right, our next caller and our final caller for the day is Steven Redhorn. Steven, welcome, man.
Hey, what's up?
Yo, dude. So, what do you got for us? What's your thoughts on PvP and Star Citizen? Any questions or comments you want to make?
Yeah. So I was just listening, and I had to say, whatever the point Vergil makes on why the combat was better, but now worse, I totally agree. And then you guys move on to the topic that fixing combat with temporary hotfix is a good thing to do in favor of the game's what is it called, publicity, because of the possibility that it's gonna provide better experience for all the streamers, big time streamers, who might comes to Star Citizen.
Sure.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that, but to be honest though, I don't feel like most of the streamers who came to here to Star Citizen actually did dive deep enough to see like all the lack of depth of the combat and all of that.
They just see how pretty the game is.
Yeah, they do. They first, wow, this game is pretty, bro. Look at that. The stars, and then they see the bugs. You know, most of them they're not unsatisfied about the lack of depth in the combat. They're unsatisfied by the bugs.
Star Citizen is sold exclusively at this point on its potential, I feel like.
Yeah.
Not on its current state. But its current state getting better has made the potential of it seem more of a reality. And I think that's why it's selling a lot more now.
It's almost it's funny. It's kind of, I guess it's cheeky. It's almost a liability how good this game looks, because then it doesn't get judged on the actual game.
I sort of agree, yeah.
Like you go to Reddit and you look at this game, you're like, wow, that looks like a game, I want to play. And then they come in the stream, we tell them, yeah, but wait till you run around and they're getting these 30Ks, or you try to, shoot at a pip. So yeah, we're almost, it's tough how good this game looks, because that's the thing, right? Is you could be distracted looking at sunsets, entire planets covered in cities and stuff, and then not even want to go looking at the combat yet, because you've never seen anything like this in any other game. So I agree. Yeah, it's kind of funny that people only really start to look at combat when they're super deep into investigating the game already.
Yeah, and then they're already hooked at that point.
Well, yeah. Like a carrot or hammerhead turrets and trying to shoot at all the fucking tapes, and it doesn't hit. The turret doesn't work and stuff. That's, I think, it's like a good point they can hotfix.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I didn't touch on, I totally forgot to, with Vergil's comments about the way the ships flew in 3.4 versus 3.5. Part of the problem, I think, why it was so difficult to hit was because everybody flew around like a friggin' hummingbird all over the place. And I think that, like, real quick, let's touch on this with everybody here in the call, including you, Steven, is did the change that they made at the time make sense? Because that's what they were trying to get rid of, is that it was, even though it might have been better and might have been more skillful, I agree, it was weird. And it didn't seem right. It didn't seem right to me.
It needed work.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Did the change, obviously the result of the change wasn't exactly great. But was the shift that they made, did it make sense to you? Or at the time were you like, no, this doesn't look good? I mean, the second I saw how much it was sliding around, I was like, this is trash. Because at the time I was a racer, man. I loved racing. Yeah. So I guess the tactile feel, or the responsiveness is the right word, of like the racing ships, that was gone. And it sucks. Like, I hate it now, and I used to obsess over it.
So I think there's two answers to that question. One is the transition from 3.4 to 3.5 wasn't purely just flight tuning.
Yeah.
You have to separate the flight model from flight tuning.
Also,
Flight model is the programming of physics, and to which we all know that prior to 3.5, I think the physics engine that was driving the flight model weighed a lot when it came to networking and was a bit excessive for what was described and needed to be in an MMO. But it's the flight tuning that is the reason we control all of our ships, right? It's what separates a freelancer from a Gladius right now as far as the flight experience. That's attributes to a ship and the flight tuning rather than the model. Now, yeah, in 3.4, there were huge problems. It was it didn't handle well under lag, which is why you would get the Skippy pip back in the day. The strafing around in circles, that's what happens when you have almost complete free reign over 6 degrees of freedom and there's not much limitations between thrusting forward and then
I mean, our maneuvering
strafing.
thrusters were like insanely powerful.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, the benefits to that was, yes, it was an arcadey replayable experience for a lot of people. Some people were miserable with it, but it was also exploitable, right? Like there used to be this method to fly called the bathtub roll or the rainbow roll, if any of you guys remember that, which is like the modern day of macroing strafes now. But there was ways to cheese it or to get around it and break immersion and then be impossible to shoot at. So it had its problems 100%. But I think the key here is, and this is my biggest disappointment with the current state of flight, and I think what we were sold at and what was marketed towards us back when 3.5 was coming was this, real heavy on physics, real heavy on using strategy, this cat and mouse kind of flying our spaceships, feeling the weight of our ships, drifting and stuff like that, and this kind of simulation feel to the flight model and the flight experience to be like real space where you have to, and the thrusters, your main engines actually controlling your ship and not being able to use all the strength of your lateral thrusters and maneuvering thrusters to the same as your main engine. But the problem is that came at a cost of fun. And I think when it comes to video games in general, and this is like discussed about in game developing all the time, is that you can't take control away from the player in any video game for an excessive amount of time. And that's the problem in which we have right now, is we don't have much control. We're very limited in how we can fly, how much we can actually fly our ship. And if you want to make split decisions or changes to a way you're flying because there's an asteroid in front of you,
you can't.
You better have planned that 15 seconds in advance. So that's why the race courses became completely redundant, because you can't make these right turns anymore that you used to be able to back then. So I think that there's got to be a balance between replayability and just straight up fun, and then look at the simulation stuff, the physics, the drift of our ship, the weight of our ship after that. But this is a Chris Roberts space game. We've got to, every single person here has to be able to go in and do an ECN mission or go in PvP and just have fun. That's got to exist, and that's got to be the priority. And I think that there's a middle ground. I'm not of the opinion that we just have to go back, just revert it back to 2.6, revert it back to 3.4. I think there's a middle ground there, but I think the focus needs to be fun. That's all.
Vergil, I was not actually around back when the offline model was here, so I want to ask you specifically a question. How do you feel if they have the new fly model, or fly field, whatever you feel, say, but reduce the time to kill back to the original value, and somehow nerf the auto game ball? Do you think that will bring fun back into the game? Because one thing I feel that's not fun right now is you just fucking spam Gatlings and whatever that's in the meta, and it's all talking about that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. Having fast time to kill can be really beneficial. Like back in the day, if you were flying the right ship that was alpha damage heavy, meaning it was a big heavy hitter in a small amount of time, if you got the accuracy, there was nothing more rewarding. Like you'd be cheering if you landed a shot at somebody's cockpit, which was really, really fun. But I don't know the answer to it. I'd have to see what it's like first. But I could say that there was scenarios where time to kill was.
I think it's a bit long right now.
It's a bit too long now. But
should you be able to kill a caterpillar easily?
I guess I was thinking more about smaller ships. I think larger ships are appropriately tanky.
But that's the problem right now, right, Mike? Because of the combat balancing right now, an arrow is harder to kill than a caterpillar. An arrow, like the smaller, harder to shoot at ship, it actually has the most defense in comparison to the large and easier ships to hit. So that's literally the problem. Is
I think
you think you're buying a defensive ship and you're not. You got to buy the little mosquito fighter to live the longest.
I think part of the problem is what define fun. So like what's fun for Vergil might be not fun for White, and White might think something's fun that I don't. And for me, I think the general idea and how to make combat inclusive for everybody is to have a bit of a higher time to kill. Maybe not higher than what we have now, but definitely not what it was back then in 3.4, where one shot and you could be killed. I mean the idea that you are able to land multiple hits and get the visual feedback that I hit them, not just a little hit marker going off, but like seeing it hit their hull, seeing their shield splash. I think that's part of the Mike, Star Citizen experience, right?
I think when we say that time to kill is too high, we're talking about you pretty much having a lined up shot and most of those shots missing.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Aren't, So that's why we're not as worried about like the caterpillars or whatever, and we're all for like damage states and being able to see them. But with the smaller ships, it's mostly like you're relying on shield penetration and hitting 1 out of 10 repeater shots right now.
And I think that's the point of the auto gimbals and why they even came in is getting that feedback that like I'm doing something, because the way it was back then, Vergil, because coming from somebody who wanted to get better at combat, it was like you just shot and missed constantly and then got one shot and killed. It was the most frustrating game ever.
You would miss 19 out of 20 shots, and then 3 shots that you would land over a 1 minute period would kill someone. I agree. But there was also this huge satisfaction to if you did get that shot off and you managed to hit their cockpit. It was the headshot in any other video game. It was great. I think there's a balance between the two. To loop back around what you said with the time to kill, I think there's a balance between the two. Do I think it's in a right place right now? Not so much. But it shouldn't go back to what it was. No.
Me personally, if it's possible, I'm more for making fixed weapons easier to use, so that's a viable gameplay type, even for people who aren't the most advanced players. So like basically instead of nerfing auto gimbals, like I would try to make fixed weapons work better. And we've had versions of the game where they weren't as difficult to hit with.
Yeah,
so
but the problem,
it's possible.
And the problem with that, right, is like the game in general is we're playing in 3D space and we're aiming. We have pixel-based aim. So the problem is does that hold up in a MMO environment, or do we need to start making compromises and have some sort of assist? Now, I don't like auto gimbal assist at all, but the problem is when you're shooting at pixels. In MMOs like this, that's why it's so hard. It's networking is the problem. And I think that a compromise needs to get landed at some sort of point, whether it's like auto gimbal.
I think it's the speed that needs to be compromised, so we're firing closer to each other.
Yep. And that's a whole. And
I think they know
that
too.
Which we could open up another 30 minutes on. But exactly. Because the problem is too, and I want to quickly just touch on that too, is it's super important to know that in 3.5 and the flight balancing as it is, all of this was designed for us to be flying at SCM speeds, and a huge problem, which is why it's on the roadmap, is because
Nobody is.
everybody's flying combat at cruise speeds right now, which is why we're also getting this giant drift. So the problem is David Coulson put all these personalities into all of these ships under the assumption that none of you were ever going to be flying above the SCM. And the problem is everybody's just throttling to the max every time. You want to go shoot at the 9 tails in front of you, you're going to try and boost to 1200 SCM speed to get to him. And the problem is that all that hard work and all that balancing was under the assumption that you were going to stay within that SCM speed. So, from day one, everybody was playing it to not the purpose of all of the balancing anyways. So, and that's why we're seeing on the roadmap them trying to restrict us more when we enter this cruise speed so that we stop going into it in combat, because that's a huge consequence.
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right. Well, guys, I think we're probably going to call it here for this week, but now I think it would be really good. I had Whitesnake and Zimmy on in the past. I think it might be cool to have like somewhat of a roundtable sort of thing in the future about this, and try and kind of keep having these conversations in public spaces where maybe they aren't necessarily normally talked about, and maybe we can get somewhere with this stuff and hopefully see positive changes in the future, because I don't think anybody is happy with it. I mean, we saw our 1 out of 10 and 2 out of 10 things. Steven, thank you for your call. I'm gonna put you into the caller dump area. Thank you so much. And guys, some people in chat are asking for because I guess they came in a little bit later, but also I didn't have any links prepared, so I apologize for that. Do you guys stream it all? Do you make YouTube videos? Where can people find you? Obviously, Whitesnake is putting in the Legacy instructional series in chat right now. But Whitesnake, go ahead and share who you are, where people can find you, and all those things.
I'm Whitesnake. I'm the tactics officer for Legacy Fleet. We're a Merc Horde, probably medium-sized, and the biggest thing we do that would probably be the way somebody would know about us is the Legacy instructional series, which is basically a YouTube channel with a bunch of videos focused on flight and combat. And we've been there's a lot of old videos on there. We've been doing it for I think 6 years now. Yeah. So a lot of old stuff, and then there's some new stuff in the last 6 months too that we worked on. So go ahead and take a look if you haven't already.
And Vergil?
Just quickly before I, advertise my stuff, I guess, but I just want to say, huge fan of your stream, Twerk. I love to watch it as a viewer. You keep me entertained every night. And, aside from, coming onto the podcast for this stuff, I just genuinely like enjoying your show seriously and your stream. But first of, I also want to just say too, I apologize if I come off a bit hostile or salty, I guess it would be fitting for the channel, but
maybe because I'm extra.
I just feel like I feel like it's just because there's 300 or 400, 500 other guys in the other Discord that I wouldn't be doing a service if I wasn't being brutally honest, and
sure.
I would never hear the end of it if I was sugarcoating things. So I'm hugely optimistic of the game, and I love it. I'm still just as invested as I've ever been. But I have a little podcast. It's just called the Deep Dive Podcast.
I've been on it. It's awesome.
PvP stuff. Yeah, and that's it really. I've got a Twitch stream. Someone just did a shout out. I don't particularly worry too much about it, but
that's where you do the podcast.
I really like your stream, man. That's it.
That's where you do the podcast, right? Do you post the podcast on YouTube at all?
Yeah, I do. Just Google Stanton Deep. Oh, sorry, just YouTube Stanton Deep Dive if you want. That's all.
All right.
But I appreciate it, man. This is super healthy for the game.
Yeah.
Super healthy.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, because this is just a subject I don't know enough about, and I'm not going to sit here and claim that I have any idea what I'm talking about, right, when it comes to these things. So all I can do is ask the questions. I can't really give too many answers. I know how important it is to me, but that's it. That's the extent of my understanding of combat in this game. I mean, I haven't touched Arena Commander or even really attempted any sort of serious PvP in probably years. So, yeah, I need help with this stuff, and you guys are the guys I'm always going to go to for that kind of stuff. So I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. And for all of you guys that are talking smack in chat, I've been writing names on a notepad this entire time. I'll see you after the show.
Reezer, that's you. All right, man. Guys, thank you so much. We'll let you go. And yeah, I'll do the little YouTube outro thingy. Is the whole thing, guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know what you think about this combat discussion. Everything that the guys talked about. If you have anything you want to add, feel free to leave a comment. And obviously, White and Vergil, I highly recommend you guys go and if you can, try and reply to some of those comments, because obviously they will likely be directed at you and not necessarily at me, so me commenting on them wouldn't make much sense. All right, so thanks for watching, guys. Have a great one, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.